Hello, this is the daily weather briefing for Tuesday, April 26, 2016, and this is a special severe weather edition as we focus on the severe weather across the central portion of the United States today, and then tomorrow we'll take a look at tomorrow's event, but right now we're focused on Tuesday's event. So let's get into the current weather conditions so we can kind of move into our severe weather analysis. Not much happening across the western portion of the United States. Generally cool conditions associated with the cooler air from the northwest flow aloft. Another storm system will be moving in there later today. The main storm system that was in the Intermountain West yesterday is now pulled into the Central Plains, and some pockets of energy have actually set off some pretty potent thunderstorms across Illinois and Missouri. We have a couple of severe thunderstorm watches in effect there, but producing large hail and some very damaging winds. We do have some snow back here in Wyoming, and we'll look at those warnings in just a minute here, but we expect that to increase later on today. But over the northern tier of the United States, the temperatures are a lot cooler than what they were yesterday, as we have cooler air filtering in from Canada, and we have a very strong warm sector down to the south, so that's the reason why we're getting the conditions that we're seeing today. Looking at the watch warning map, again, we have some isolated weather outlooks out here with some flood advisories and hydrological outlooks, but mainly we have some winter storm warnings and winter weather advisories covering much of Wyoming. Red flag warnings over southeastern portion of New Mexico, and some high wind warnings out here in the west, and some fire weather watches out here in the western portion of Texas as the conditions are very dry and the winds are very high at this point in time. And then the flash flood advisories and warnings continue across portions of eastern Texas associated with the rains that we've had in the past, and that'll be aggravated somewhat over the next several days as we get waves and waves of storm systems coming across the southern portion of the United States. And again, we got that severe thunderstorm watch in effect for portions of Illinois and Missouri for that complex of storms. Looking at the visible satellite, we see where all the weather's happening right now. It's in across the central portion of the United States. The upper level low is still out here around Albuquerque, and you can see that spin out there. We've had pockets of energy pushing out into the central portion. One pocket of energy produced those storms. We have another smaller pocket of energy that's already begun to produce thunderstorms between Tulsa and Oklahoma, or Oklahoma City. But right now, not a lot in the central portion of the United States, as the atmosphere, though very unstable, is very capped, and we're kind of waiting to see what's going to happen here. Looking at the water vapor satellite, you can see that complex of thunderstorms quite strong, quite powerful, and quite high in the atmosphere, and then some more thunderstorms over here between Tulsa and Oklahoma here. But again, the main pockets of energy are still out here in New Mexico, so we're still waiting for that to come into play later today. And then we have the storm system that's off the west coast here that'll be coming in and affecting the southern tier of the United States this week. Now, taking a look at radar here, not much across the United States. We do have those areas of snow and some showers across Wyoming, which will be increasing later today. This is some false echoes out here in New Mexico, maybe some scattered showers, but not a lot right now at this point. Those scattered thunderstorms between Tulsa and Oklahoma, and that big complex of thunderstorms between Peoria all the way extending back to just north of Springfield, Missouri. These thunderstorms are quite tall, producing very heavy rains, some damaging wind, and some very large hail. And then, well, like usual, the Northeast is still in winter here. They haven't quite moved over to summertime, where they've got some snow and a little bit of ice out here just north of Boston, with some rain and some scattered showers, and maybe a few isolated thunderstorms in Pennsylvania. Okay, so let's talk about our severe weather analysis. Not much happened yesterday, except for just where we expected it to take place. In the slight risk areas, we had some large hail and some damaging thunderstorm winds. A couple of significant events out here just north of Salina and west of Kansas City, and that was associated with a complex that developed late last night. And then we had some thunderstorms that popped up across central Texas that produced some pretty strong hail, large hail, and some damaging winds out here in just south of San Antonio. Now, looking at today's severe weather outlook, we do have a moderate risk of severe thunderstorm that extends all the way from the southern portion of Nebraska now down into a central portion of Texas, and this is new here. Originally, it was only down to the Red River Valley, but now it includes a large portion of the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and we'll explain that in just a few minutes as to why. Now, I think this northern portion is probably going to be shaved off a little bit later today. Because we have a boundary layer that extends all the way from just north of Salina down to Emporia, from where that complex of thunderstorms that move through out of Kansas City. But I don't think there's going to be much penetration more to the north of that. So I think this area is going to be brought down a little bit later today. And so I don't think they'll be quite as risky. But again, this is a good, decent outlook across this area at this point in time. Here's the tornado parameters. Tornado outlook, generally a 10% chance for thunderstorm or tornado for a tornado within a given point of 25 miles in this area in yellow here. And some of these tornadoes right now, that looks like the tornado parameters are coming down a little bit. That though we could have some significant tornadoes, I don't know they'll be quite as long tracked and as violent as was expected earlier in the week, the way the models were looking. So I think that's beginning to come down a little bit, but it's still very much a factor there. The damaging hail, however, is a significant possibility, and I think that's the reason why we have the moderate risk here primarily, is because the hail could be anywhere between 2 to 4 inches in diameter, really from Nebraska all the way down into portions of Dallas and so forth, even a little bit further south from there. And then the damaging wind, it looks like to me that they're expecting a pretty large complex to form out here to the west of Dallas-Fort Worth, with a 45% chance of very, very damaging winds up to about 90 miles per hour out here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And then we have kind of a higher risk that surrounds that area that goes up into the Nebraska area. So let's take a look at our synopsis, and what I've done here is, instead of looking at our normal charts, I've kind of taken the charts that we have that I've gotten off the College DuPage, and I'm going to go look at some special features that I tend to look at when I'm looking at severe weather potential here. This first one is at 300 millibars, and basically this is the upper level jet that I look at, and I look for this left entrance region and this right rear entrance exit region. The left entrance region, if we follow this along, is going to pretty much intersect somewhere between well, we'll have a portion that will go up in Colorado around the upper level low, but we'll also have a portion that branches out here, and we'll probably come into the south central portion of Kansas somewhat a little bit later today, and that's where I think we're going to have the explosion of thunderstorms that could be tornadic in that area. Now looking at the 500 millibar, what I look for here is the colder air loft and the cold troughs that could come and trigger. And we really have two cold troughs, and really here's the cold low pressure system as itself. We have one trough that's kind of beginning to move out here into the central portion of the United States, which I think is on the edge of that jet stream, which will enhance thunderstorms pretty soon, within the next 2 or 3 hours or so. And then we have the main trough that's still sitting back here across the southwest. Now looking at the 700 millibar, I'm looking at a couple of things here. The winds here at the mid-levels, as well as the thermal trough. And we can see the thermal trough of temperatures ranging from, I would say, roughly 6 degrees Celsius down to about 10 degrees Celsius. It extends across the central portion of the United States, just west of Wichita and west of Oklahoma City. And I think that'll be the impetus where the thunderstorms will develop along the dry line, is that tends to be where the thermal trough is at, and where that upper level jet and this mid-level jet also intersects. Again, is indicating right where that central portion of Kansas is located here. Now looking at the 850 millibar, this here we're looking at moisture and the low-level jet, and from what I could tell from my observations, we have a pretty decent low-level jet sitting along the dry line here over western Oklahoma. Again, it's kind of beelining right for that central Kansas area, south central Kansas area. We also have a lot of kind of a pool of moisture that's just sitting there in these areas, and that some of those thunderstorms across Missouri are feeding off of, and a little bit of boundary now that's now formed out there. And what's kind of interesting here is we've got some drier air in the mid levels, or at the low levels here over South Texas, but the moisture is kind of coming over land and pushing up into this area. So we might get a little punch of drier air down to the southwestern portion of the United States, southwestern portion of this area, that kind of might limit some of the thunderstorm activity that develops out here in southwest Texas. But there is a plenty of moisture here. Now again, if we look at that jet, where that upper level jet was going, where the mid level jet was going, where the thermal ridge is going, again, let's just kind of take the highlighter pen here, and I'll take a look at just really what we're kind of looking at here. What we're kind of thinking here is really a small area where we think the greatest potential for tornadic activity, or maybe significant tornadoes, may be. And we really think this might be from Salina down to Emporia, or to Wichita, to the northwest of Oklahoma City, over to Alva. That's where we think the greater risk of tornadoes may be at this point, because that's really kind of where everything's kind of lining up. It's not a huge widespread area. It's kind of a more compact area, and that's probably where the higher risk would be at this point in time. Now moving on to a little bit more of our surface analysis, you can see here we do have sufficient dew points below this frontal boundary are ranging from the mid 60s into the 70s. By far not a problem at all whatsoever. Looking at the Cape values are ranging well into the I would say about 3,500 joules to near 4,000 joules out here across the dry line in western Oklahoma, and up into the Wichita area down south. So we got plenty of instability at the surface here. And if we look at the surface convective inhibition, you can actually see the inhibitions beginning to decrease along that dry line. So the hole is beginning to open up for potential for thunderstorms to begin to form on that dry line here. We look at the lifted indices. The indexes are well into about -9, even some values showing close to about -12, -13. So the atmosphere is extremely unstable from south central Kansas all the way across western Oklahoma into south central Texas here. So we have a very unstable atmosphere that's just really ready to go. Now here's kind of the limiting factor that we're noticing here, is the storm relative helicity is really kind of lacking right now. You want to see values greater than 150, and there really isn't anything here across Oklahoma. Now again, this is a model representation, and we expect this to increase as we get more of the jet involved with the low level jet. But that's kind of, again, what we're kind of thinking here is the greatest risk for severe weather. We kind of expect, especially for tornadoes, to be in this area here, and really kind of along this section here probably looks like the greatest risk for potential tornadoes down the road. We expect this shear to move into this area later today and increase, especially as the upper level and mid-level jets begin to punch in that when this activity moves in. Now looking at the surface plot across Kansas, we can see a couple of things here. We have a low pressure system that was originally here, and it's now moved up towards just north and west of Salina. We have the dry line that extends all the way back here towards Pratt and down into Oklahoma City near Gage, or down into Oklahoma near Gage. So we have all this moisture here that's forming up here. You know, some of these dew points are in the upper 60s here in this area, and then we have that boundary that just kind of formed as a result of those thunderstorms that developed around Kansas City. So we have this a lot of moisture that's pushing up against this boundary here. We have winds out of the east, northeast here, winds out of the southwest here. It wouldn't surprise me to see if we're going to see some decent tornado activity to begin to form here and along this area here. As time begins to form down the road here today, we could see some decent tornadoes here, and especially as it begins to form along the dry line down the road. If we look at the satellite picture right now out of Kansas, you can see that there are a lot of agitated clouds associated with this. And let me just draw in here real quick where I think the boundary is. We have this boundary here, and you can just barely see it. This is the boundary that was formed earlier today. And then I'm going to add in here the dry line here. Let me use the color that's visible here. The dry line is about right here. We have a little bit of a bulge here in this area here. So, where we have these points and then we have the upper level low out here. So all this moisture, everything's kind of coming together where this boundary is kind of still moving south, or it's kind of stagnant right now at this point. But as thunderstorms begin to form here, you can begin to see some of these cumulus clouds become more towering cumulus clouds as they begin to move and ride up this way and they interact with these boundaries. Sometimes they can be enhanced and you can see some large tornadoes form. So I think you've got a decent risk here of tornadoes that could form right along this boundary in this area, and then I think eventually down here in this area here also in Kansas. Now looking at Oklahoma, we have a little bit of a different situation here. Now we have kind of a weak low forming here out the surface. We've noticed some of the pressures beginning to drop out here around the panhandle of Texas here, and a little bit of a bulging of the dew points here, of the dry line here. So we might see some thunderstorm activity begin to form out in this area later today. And as they move towards the northeast, with the jet here, although the jet's not quite as favorable here, we might see some tornadic activity because we have quite a bit of moisture here. Definitely large hail will be a potential here, but I think the larger damaging tornadoes will most likely be up in this area here. We might see some large tornadoes that form out here, but they're not going to be super long lasting. And looking at the satellite out of Oklahoma at this point in time, you can see, well, let me just draw this in here real quick. You can see the dry line has formed out here, and it's become kind of messy. And that's the thing that's kind of interesting about this whole thing here, is that it's not real clean like we've seen in the past. And I think a lot of people were thinking that this would be shut down and we'd have clear skies out here, but obviously we've got some thunderstorms that have begun to form out here, and again they're going to create a little bit of a cold pull here, and some boundaries that are going to be in place here. So, and the thing that we need to look at here also across Oklahoma, and even though it's not super defined here, but look how you've got these rolls here in these cloud patterns. Okay, that indicates shear, and even though it's not super strong, at least that's not what it's indicating. There's still super strong. Again, there is rotational shear in the atmosphere, and it's going to only be enhanced as time goes on, as we get the upper level jet and the mid-level jet and low-level jets begin to converge, as well as you've got the upper level system begin to move in. So even though the shear is not extremely high right now, or the listening is not extremely high right now, we do expect that to increase as time goes on. So let's talk about our summary today. Again, we have a negative tilted trough that's going to be coming in today. The left entrance upper level jet and low level jet intersect over southeastern Kansas, and I think that'll extend down into Oklahoma, at least northern portions of Oklahoma. We have plenty of high cape, plenty of instability in the atmosphere, and decent speed shear aloft. The speed shear is very decent. The only cons we have right now at this point is the weak storm relative helicity. We're kind of lacking that, but we still have shear in the atmosphere, and the directional shear is a little messy too, and that can sometimes play havoc when it comes to high-end events. So we'll have to monitor this. I think we're at a high-end enhanced to medium moderate risk. I don't think we're going to go high risk today by any means whatsoever. I just don't think the conditions are favorable for that. We will see some strong tornadoes today. They'll probably be more isolated than an outbreak, and it's kind of interesting. SPC did not issue a public weather outbreak statement today. They just kind of stuck with their description for today. So it's kind of an interesting to see what happens. We'll monitor this. We'll keep you posted. We are going to be live today at our storm. If you go to our Facebook page at the storm game, we'll be able to tell you what's going on over there. We also have live streaming through a storm chaser that'll be out in that area today, as well as we'll be live streaming on our Ustream site later. So we'll keep you advised. Thank you for paying attention, and I hope you have a good day.